Hey, folks. Welcome back to Kadena Campfire, March 15th edition. Today we have a fun, casual conversation. I'm sad to say that Doug will not be joining us as he is feeling under the weather. So it'll just be me and you, community. My name is Tyler Benster. I'm the tech adoption lead here at Cadena Eco. Today we're going to try something a little bit new in Campfire. So we're going to do a couple things. We'll first start off, as we've done in past iterances, with a general discussion of some past news. We'll give some quick updates for Cadena. We'll jump into live Q&A with community on Discord, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you may be watching. And then the new thing we're going to try is we're going to do a reverse Q&A with the community where I will ask questions and ask for responses as a way of sort of brainstorming and interacting and providing opportunity for more direct feedback as well. So with that, without any further ado, if anyone hasn't been to Campfire before, this is a community-driven conversation where we try to give insights into what's happening at Cadena and come together as a community to chat. So the space is meant to provide opportunity to ask any questions that you have or may want to know more about. So let's jump into a quick update and discussion. So first of all, current events. Been seeing some comments on Twitter, Cadena specific and a lot more broader economy specific around SVP and signature bank closure and how that may impact Cadena, how that may impact crypto. So first with Cadena, Cadena is not impacted at all by SVB or signature bank being closed. So just wanted to make sure that folks were aware of that. There's nothing to be concerned about, at least directly from those kind of deposit risks, etc. But I think it is very interesting. So on the VC side, I have a number of portfolio companies that have been impacted by this closure. People that have venture debt, maybe no longer having certainty over whether they'll be able to draw down on those lines. Payroll was impacted in California, particularly on Friday, although it seems like come Monday, Tuesday, that's largely been resolved. I can't speak at all to the systematic risk to the banking system, as that's not my area of expertise. I spent a summer at Barclays. And I remember underneath the desk, we had a Lehman Brothers emergency kit. And that's about the closest I've come to a bank failure or understanding that part of the world. But what I would say here is, at least as far as Cadena is concerned, there's no direct risk or impact. But certainly, insofar as the broader economy is impacted by systematic bank failures, and Cadena has a relationship with the S&P 500 statistically, there can be who knows what impacts me with the general economy, but just wanted to highlight that directly, no impacts there. So in terms of Cadena updates, we've had a successful builders call with Randy and the tech team last Friday. So that was great. Thanks to those that attended that. And definitely please keep an eye out for the Cadena JS learning platform. So that's going to be announced a little bit into the next week, but 20 people will be selected sometime this week or next week for early access. So that'll be really exciting to get some early feedback from the Cadena JS learning platform and ultimately roll that out to the broader community. So those are the main updates here from the Cadena side. Always want to give some shout outs to community for those that are here. We have a bunch of people. I guess we have the Wizzes in the house. Very nice. Good to see you. Lots of folks coming into the chat. So really exciting to see everyone here. Person who guesses how many times Tyler forgets the mute button gets a hoodie. That's great. Well, since it's just me, I won't be muting very much. So you'll hear all my clearing of my throat and sipping of water or whatever. Ahoy. Hello. Awesome. So really cool to see everyone here. And we'll jump into questions here in just a moment. All right, let me look here. So first question we will take is from, I think some of these are from Discord. Shakda asks, what is going on with Ledger? So Ledger is always a favorite question and something that I know many of us are really excited for. I'm not directly involved in Ledger, but did ask the team for an informal update. Ledger is currently in audit right now. So it is in progress, and Cadena is also working with some external partners to try and give Ledger as much support and accelerate things as quickly as possible when it comes to that audit. So we're doing everything we can that's in our control at the Cadena side to facilitate and accelerate this. And there's active effort at Cadena going on to move this along as quickly as possible. But ultimately, it's sort of on ledger as to when this integration will be launched. But thanks for the question. I know it's an eagerly anticipated integration. Next question from K account Rye 1980. Is Cadena's fund affected in any way with these bank closures? So as we answered in the update, nope, there's no impact directly from the SVB or Signature bank closure. So no direct impact there. Question from K account Dies. How will you guys set your standards when it comes to grantees? That's a great question. So I think the standard is pretty much similar or equivalent to almost any seed investment type of standard with an extra asterisk. So first of all, I think it's about people. It's about team. Is there a vision, of course, but most importantly, is there some technical capability in order to actually execute on whatever the vision is? So we see a lot of teams that have a great idea and some good understanding of how to do growth hacking or marketing and building community, which are very important skills critical to crypto Web3 projects, but don't have a technical person or someone that is able to actually code the smart contracts or front-end web GUI on the team and comes to us for a grant wanting to then hire and pay that person. And that is oftentimes a more difficult sell than a team that comes in and says, hey, we're building this in-house. We've already started a program. We know Pact. We've written these smart contracts. That's an easier sell for a grant because we know that there isn't as much counterparty risk if there is some gap between launching to market and being able to have folks that are involved full-time and really personally invest in the project. So we try to back projects that have phenomenal teams. And then I think in terms of standards, showing some commitment to Cadena and to the ecosystem and maybe being a member of the community already or having talked with some community projects. We definitely want to make sure that projects are devoted to Cadena and excited to be building on Cadena. We see some grantees that are sort of these multi-chain grant farms that are trying to get grants from every layer one. And by just doing these small integrations, and we're really focused on projects that are going to move the needle for the Kadena community, or at least have the potential to provide some value and opportunities to the broader ecosystem to work and build. And then finally, I think the last thing I'd mention here is momentum. So it really draws our attention. Usually we don't give a grant at the very first contact that we have with a group. We like to sort of see how they progress. And so some cases we've been following a project for some time and already have been watching them and can see that progress momentum. If it's a first introduction to folks, we like to kind of see how they are proceeding and working over the course of some weeks. I've always advocated for a high resolution financing model where you can give out, for example, smaller chunks of cash, or if you give someone 5K and the project doesn't really go anywhere, it's a much smaller loss than if you give someone 500K and the project doesn't really go anywhere. So we've had some models where we've given companies or projects multiple grants, initially a smaller grant and then a larger grant as they've sort of proved that they've been good stewards of that capital and have used it well to grow the project. So those are some pieces, at least on the people and structural side. The last thing I would say is that what differs here compared to, for example, a seed or VC investment is one of our mandates is to grow and support the Canadian ecosystem. So of course, we also give grants to projects that might be something more like a Blocker Explorer or the types of projects that have historically not potentially had very high profitability or revenue, but provide a real big value to the ecosystem. So that's kind of the dual mandate is, of course, we want to support projects that can be economically and financially viable from a business perspective, but we also want to support projects that are going to just be a boon to the ecosystem and provide services that provide value to the community, even if it doesn't provide an economic or financial return to the builders. So that's a little bit on the dual mandate and how it differs from VC. See a live question from JC. No Doug today. Alas, Doug is under the weather, so couldn't join us today. But we will have a fun section in the second half of the AMA where we will do a reverse AMA where I'll ask some questions to the community and brainstorm with you all. So hopefully that will spice things up and provide a fun alternative to Doug, even though Doug is irreplaceable. Okay. So, see another question from ox.kda. When will Stuart Popejoy be on Campfire? All right, that's a well-timed question from Discord, I believe. So the good news is Stuart will actually be on Campfire next week, next Wednesday. So mark your calendars. We'll have the one and only Stuart Popejoy with us here in T-minus 7 days and net 11 minutes. So that'll be fantastic. Okay, let's see here. I see a question from Gregory K. How are we going to get more users? I think that's a good question. And I think there's a few ways that we get more users. So the first is raising awareness of Cadena in general. I think we have a wonderfully vibrant community, but if you ask your average person on the street, have you heard of Bitcoin? I bet you they'll say yes at this point. You ask them if they know Cadena, odds are they're going to say no unless you're in certain local regions where there's high penetration. And so that's something that we can improve on, is just awareness of the project itself. Another key area is utility and application growth. So if Cadena becomes a Amazon Web Services like backend where developers create applications that need to write to a distributed ledger and use Cadena because its technology is just the best, that's an awesome outcome, right? If people can, write high volumes of transactions using Cadena as a distributed ledger, and a user can use a Web3 project or a distributed application, not even having heard of Cadena while it powers some of the world's most important applications, that would be an outcome I'd be delighted with. So that's an alternate path to get there, is more the utility angle. And I think the most realistic is somewhere in between, where there's certain projects or applications and use cases on Cadena, whether it's using gas stations for more seamless transactions. One we've talked about internally a bit is thinking about like remittances, for example. If you need to swap between two currencies and you can use Cadena without needing to buy KDA and go to some centralized exchange and then export that to a wallet and then only be able to swap. And instead you can take advantage of gas stations to seamlessly just like swap two assets right off the board. I mean, that's a pretty killer application, for example. And I think there's many examples of this type of thing, looking at how Cadena can power applications. So I think utility and supporting projects and helping builders build new and unique things on Cadena that take advantage of the layer one's capabilities. That's part of what draws people into the ecosystem as well, and which is why we've been so focused on builders. But this is a wonderful question in general, and actually a question I'm going to probably do for the reverse AMA here, just to see what people's thoughts are. So I'm very keen to hear what community's thoughts are around marketing and how we get more users in general, and I'll come back to that in some minutes. Okay, from Noah Crypto, I often hear Bitcoiners say, how can a decentralized blockchain have a CEO, COO, etc.? What's your take on that? Great question. So I think the key thing here, and sometimes we're a little sloppy with terminology, but Cadena core engineering team, the organization, has a CEO, much as some of the core maintainers of Ethereum have CEOs or CTOs. But the key thing here is that Chainweb, the blockchain, does not have a CEO, COO, etc. And ultimately, the reason why the Cadena core team has influence on the blockchain is because when updates are made to the software, that miners have sufficient trust in that engineering team to adopt that updated software. So if, for example, a year from now, someone else made a software update that the miners preferred over the Cadena core team's update and adopted that, then de facto, the engineering control would sort of have drifted over to them. So in some sense, I like to think about proof of work mining as almost like the original DAO. That before the phrase DAO, the acronym Decentralized Autonomous Organization, came about, Bitcoin miners were voting with their hash power what software to adopt. And that is what led to forks in Ethereum, That's what's led to forks in Bitcoin. That's part of why there's high diversity when there is a disagreement and there's a fork in a project and hash rate gets split, for example. So what I'd say there is any organization that involves humans and people often benefit from some degree of long-term planning that comes from a more top-down traditional organizational structure. However, the blockchain itself is ultimately distributed, and ultimately it's up to the miners what software they adopt and what norms become accepted. So I think the Cadena core team has been a great steward of the blockchain so far, and I personally expect that will continue for a long time into the future. But the beauty of the decentralized blockchain is there is no one individually that's in control, even the founders of the project. Of course, like Vitalik on Ethereum, we trust and hold, I think, some of the founders with some degree of reverence because they've made amazing technical contributions and oftentimes have a degree of insight and expertise into how things can be built that many of the more lay folks on the retail side or even folks on the BD or project side may not have the same insight into the particulars of consensus mechanism and block size and some of the trade-offs of the gas fee for this particular operation or function, impact, etc. But ultimately, that's the beauty of decentralization is that control is basically only when the miners accept the update. All right, let's see here. From Fudo, Tyler, will you sell me Doug's pink hoodie for less than 1,000 KDA? Well, since Doug isn't here, if you want to send me 1 KDA and then badger Doug for his hoodie to send it to you, we can try it out and see how it goes for you. But yeah, I don't know how happy Doug would be if I sold his hoodie without his permission, but we can try. All right, Katoshi. Is there a solution for Cadena to be, quote, faster? I think that's another really interesting question. So effectively, what we mean by faster, I think, is faster finality. So, for example, if you had a layer 2 on top of Cadena that offered instant finality and then ultimately finalized the blockchain once a day, once a week, once an hour, that would be one approach to faster finality. But and that's, I think, the popular one that's being taken on some other networks like Ethereum, for example. But there's alternate ways to get faster finality. So, for example, we like to talk about how credit card purchases, don't settle sometimes for many days. So first of all, they often don't post, right, for 3 days or so. And then they may not settle for 30 days or more. What's interesting here, though, is that merchants, and we've all adopted this mentality that credit card purchases have a sufficiently high likelihood of finalizing that it's okay to render the services or the goods, anticipating that the payment will go through and then clawing it back if it does not. So, and this has worked out fairly well. And I think that something else, this is true also in the crypto space. So if you are running a video game and a user makes an in-app purchase to get access to a cool sword or a hat, you might look at that user and say, hey, they've been playing this game for more than a week and they bought something before, so let's give them immediate access to the sword or hat. And then just assume that a couple minutes later it's going to finalize. And you could do that and then offer instant access. As soon as they submit the transaction, you're like, great, I wrote this to my local node and it said transaction succeeded, and now I know it's going out to the blockchain. I'm just waiting for it to be mined into a block, and then it's finalized after 2 more layers of the blockchain. I have high confidence. Now let's say that a user maliciously does a double spend. They have just enough money in that wallet to buy the sword. They try to buy the sword, and then they send that KDA simultaneously to a different wallet, and they broadcast that transaction more rapidly to miners such that it gets integrated faster. Then you, the game developer, might 3 minutes later say, oh crap, look, they double spend attacked me. Let's revoke their access to the sword. So what would be the damages in this situation? Well, the user would have fraudulently gained access to an in-game item for 3 minutes or so that they otherwise would not have had access to, and then it was revoked. And then perhaps that action is linked to their account, and maybe the next time that user tries to buy something in the game developer says, well, look, you had a previous transaction that didn't succeed. We're not going to give you instant access anymore. So you're going to have to wait for it to be finalized. That would be an example user story, user experience of how you could have a faster transaction experience with having lower risk. Now, I think if we're looking at an application that's more of a banking or DeFi transaction, giving someone even 3 minutes of access to something that they don't deserve could be quite damaging, especially if they're going to try to run some arbitrage trade or do something that involves substantial amounts of capital. So I think it's all about understanding and thinking about what applications are lower risk, what applications are higher risk. And I think that for a lot of applications, especially those that are more application or game or even some NFT in terms of showing an NFT in a user's wallet. A lot of these applications are where users get this sense of how fast something is. On the developer side, even with existing finality times, we can make the user experience super snappy and faster. But there are certain domains, especially when it comes to larger financial transactions, where that may not be possible and would require a layer 2. So hopefully that's some useful coloration and perspective. I think it's an interesting question in general. How many push-ups can Doug do? Rumor has it he's a beast. I've done at least a couple CrossFit-style workouts with Doug around Bitcoin Miami and some other crypto conferences, and I can confirm that this guy is very fit and very strong. I also am interested in this, but we'll have to have a push-up competition next time we see Doug. That'll be good. Let's see here. From distribution, that is a completely theoretical if. Can you talk more about how AWS attracts the most customers and how Cadena is emulating their strategy? Yeah, that's a really good question. So AWS attracts the most customers because it's reliable, it's low cost, and you can scale across many, many computers with low effort. And so once you've started building on AWS, rather than if you had one machine in your apartment or in your offices, and now you need to scale to 10 or 50 machines, it's relatively seamless to do that versus on AWS versus needing to buy those machines, set them up, administer them. So AWS is sort of this really just a cloud computing paradigm, the first big pioneer that captured a ton of market share. So I think on the Kadena side, this is somewhat analogous to the chain scaling, the idea that an application can launch on one chain, and then if that application grows to a sufficient size that it's congesting the chain and gas fees are going up, that they can then scale to a second chain or a third chain or a 10th chain or a 20th chain. And if someone actually had scaled to 15 or 20 chains and was still seeing congestion, then that's when the protocol layer would adapt and jump to 50 chains or 100 chains or more. And so I think that's the scaling promise that Cadena tries to offer from day one, is saying, look, you can scale here similarly to how you might scale across AWS, that there will be more than one ledger available to you as you need it. And the protocol will take care of maintaining those ledgers for you. Now, you still have to write the code, just like on AWS. If you jump from one machine to 50 machines, it's not like you immediately have all 50 machines serving requests in parallel. Now, AWS, of course, has been around for more years, and there's more services and APIs available. So, for example, you could plug into a load balancer. And today it'd be relatively easy to use, Elastic or one of these other AWS services and scale an application from one machine to 20 machines to 50 machines. But you have to remember that in the early days of AWS, you had to do this manually, right? You could spin up 50 machines, but you had to run your own load balancer. And that's more equivalent to where we are with Cadena today. It'd be sort of early days of AWS, where, if you want to scale an application across 5 chains, you got to do your own load balancing. That's not at the protocol layer at the moment. But I would love to see, and I think this is a vision of many of us at Cadena and Cadena Eco, is for that multi-chain story to become more and more transparent. Actually, I said the wrong thing. More and more opaque, that I don't want a user to know or need to care about if they're operating on chain 3 or chain 5. And it'd be amazing if we could build towards a future where even the developer doesn't need to care about whether code's running on chain 3 or chain 5. And so I think that's kind of the long-term story is saying, how can we make good software interfaces so that developers can write applications that scale across multiple ledgers, multiple chains, and have that be seamless rather than overhead and work. And that's been the story of multi-core computing, where in early days and even if you're a Python programmer in today's days, you have to manage the communication between processes. You got to handle, threading sort of can't access the same memory in a non-blocking fashion. So people use multiprocessing. They have to handle communication. They have to coordinate the workers. They have to use semaphores and different computer science constructs in order to avoid race conditions. And I think we're at a similar place right now, but there's other programming languages like, for example, Julia or even MATLAB, or if you use NumPy or numerical acceleration with certain libraries, that you can use 20 cores or 40 cores on a computer without really needing to write code that is aware of each of these codes. You're doing a matrix multiplication operation for some machine learning application, and it gets parallelized instantly. And there are domains where that scaling almost comes for free, at least from a developer programmatic complexity perspective. And so that's, I think, where we need to head towards. Is it's going to start off with certain domains, certain specific examples, like maybe you're doing an IDO, or maybe you're doing a mint, and we provide some examples for how to do that across many chains that make it easy for projects to take advantage of the multi-chain nature, at least for those moments of peak congestion. And so I think that's where we can think about trying to build that scaling story, is with these certain niche applications, well, not niche, but important applications that are more limited in scope. And then you can think about, well, what does it mean to have different swapping pools on different chains? So you have, swapping between 2 tokens on chain 0 and 2 other tokens on chain 3. And then you think about how to compose those, or you even think about how to build a liquidity pool that can span multiple chains so you can access the same pool. There's sort of increasing levels of complexity that people can build towards, that there's understanding theoretically of how to do it, even if it hasn't been implemented in practice in code yet. So yeah, great question. Let's see here. So I see a question about from distribution. The second grant cohort was announced coming soon in December and January. It's April and only one announced. How will you improve honoring roadmaps for the community? Yeah, this is a good question. Thanks for asking, distribution. I think it's always interesting when it comes to predicting time. When something is only in your hands and your control, like if it's shipping some code or launching a new web page, you can give estimates with some degree of confidence, and sometimes people are optimistic and deliver a little bit later, but at least that's like, oh wow, I'm capable of doing all the things necessary to get this out the door. And then I think with grants and with any kind of biz dev type of thing that involves multiple parties, there's other considerations where the project's specific wants, needs, and desires are important, as are some of the operational considerations of how the sort of due diligence goes on that, and making sure that we're being good stewards of capital. But yeah, there are more grants that have been given out that haven't been announced yet. I think something that we've been switching towards is a more rolling type of announcement basis rather than a cohort-based announcement. And I think we'll continue to see some grantees being announced in the coming weeks. But I agree that it would be nice to have more of a roadmap on the Cadena eco side in terms of how grantees are going out. And yeah, I think that's something that we're trying to constantly get better at in terms of process. So I hear you, and I appreciate the comment and feedback. And we will try to do a better job of signaling when grants are going out and announcing them. At the same time, it's important for us to, as with Teller last week, for example, we want to take that opportunity when we announce Teller as a grantee to also say, and look, if you're interested in Teller, please come on their Discord. Please look at their testnet implementation, start using the Oracle. We want to take that opportunity where there's marketing and some buzz around it to actually raise awareness of the project in a way that is meaningful for the project. So Teller is a perfect example of a project that got a grant way before it was announced. And they did much of the code and implementation with support from that grant over the course of weeks and months. And then it's announced, and that's when you get the media attention. So hopefully you can see in that narrative, in that example, that would be an example of a project that got a grant a while ago that has been working and has made a ton of progress. And then the announcement happens. And so I can see how from the community side, behind the scenes, you're like, what the hell? What's going on? Are they doing anything? But then sort of from the internal perspective, it's like, oh man, we're working with these folks. We're helping nurture and facilitate. And we're going to, do an announcement of the grant when it's in the interest of Teller and in the interest of Teller's project on Cadena, right? Where we're not doing it purely for a marketing, like, let's just show momentum on ecosystem. We're doing it as a, let's help this project get adoption. So that's the first priority, is saying we want to do things that are best for the builders and best for attracting builders and actually facilitating this, ecosystem emerging and integrating with other projects. So I hope that provides at least some context and motivation for why we've been doing the announcements, how we're doing them. But I also hear you that I know that for those that live, breathe, and die Cadena, that it's really nice to have this constant stream of updates to discuss, because when there's no news, I think it's easy to kind of assume the worst. And oftentimes, though, I think with especially some of these more interesting and important integrations, they do take longer. And so it's finding that right balance between how do we announce and reveal things in a way that is best for the projects and best for the ecosystem, while also making sure that community is kept abreast and that there's transparency and accountability. So I don't have a perfect answer for how we can do that, but understand the frustration and appreciate the question. Let's see here. I'll take a stab at this from Connor Lehman. How many dApps are built on the network as of today? The short answer is I have no idea. But I try to track with the Cadena ecosystem. Cadena Project Network, for example, is a great website that lists a ton of projects that are building on Cadena. And then on the grantee side and the grant application side, see spreadsheets and lists of projects. So I guess what I'd say here is, when I looked maybe 2 years ago, there was probably more on the order of 5 to 10 projects. And then a year later, there's more on the order of magnitude of like 50 to 100. And now it seems like there's more on the scale of several hundred. But it's sort of also depends a bit on what you consider to be a project. Are we talking about NFT mints? Are we talking about different coins? We're talking about more sophisticated applications. So I think the good news here is that because Cadena is so user readable and user friendly, that if you've ever downloaded Chainweaver, you might know that there's a module explorer where you can actually look at all the code that people are pushing to the blockchain. And I've done that a few times where I'll just sort of sit down in Chainweaver and click around and don't understand everything that I'm reading or looking at. But it really gives you this interesting view at all these different modules and codes that people are writing. And sometimes you'll find a project weeks or months before they announce. And I've stumbled across some projects a couple months before they contacted us, just by kind of perusing and seeing what code was hitting the blockchain. So if you want to do the big brain move, you can download Chainweaver and go to the module explorer, and you can probably find out about some projects that aren't public yet. Otherwise, if you want to take the easier route, you can go to Kadena Project Network and check them out. Let's see here. CZ the Goat. How do you deal with chain congestion if there's no randomization for distribution? Everyone will end up on the same chain over and over again as they switch from congested ones. CZ, great question. And at the moment, you're right. There isn't a sort of protocol level way to load balance or to point people different coins, different chains. Now, there's some example code that's starting to come out where people are doing some load balancing based on gas fees, recent gas fees for each chain. So, for example, if you have things set up in a fashion where you could, let's say you're doing an NFT mint, and you have 200, you're doing a mint of 10,000, and there's 20 chains, so there's 500 NFTs that can be minted on any of the chains. What you could do is, from a user experience perspective on the website, using Kadena.js or something similar, you could get a sense of what the gas fees are on each of the chains. And then when a user hits a mint button, sort of create a transaction that would mint on the relevant chain. And that would be a way. And then, at a later date, you then sort of reveal what the NFTs are, that type of thing. So that would be one way that you could effectively use the gas fees as a proxy for what the congestion is, and then choose what chain to use. But I think there's multiple ways of implementing this, but ultimately the good news is that because of gas fees, there are economic incentives for people to figure out how to use the less congested chains. So from a purely like game theoretic perspective, as T goes to infinity, developers ought to be rational and implement strategies that react to the actual costs that are incurred. But in the short and medium term, of course, there's challenges how to get there, and randomization is interesting, right? That would be one load balancing strategy that'd be very simple. If you didn't want to create gas fees, you could just say, hey, take the time of day and modulo that by 20, and that's the chain we're going to process a transaction on. And that would be a perfectly reasonable load balancing strategy that one could do with limited integration and gas fee estimation, for example. So I think that's actually a reasonable idea if you wanted to say as a quick step, if you don't want to implement some moving weighted average of gas fees and don't want to try and predict what chain is going to be more congested, then yeah, just randomizing is a decent idea if you built your application in a way that can handle transactions across multiple ledgers. So yeah, thanks for that question. I think that's interesting. Let's see here. All right, I think I will switch to the reverse AMA if folks are interested in that. So I had a couple questions that I had been thinking about. So my first one for the community, and so here's how we're going to do this: is I'm going to ask a question, we'll put it down below, and then would love to see folks give an answer in the chat, and then we'll try to highlight some of those answers. So my first question for community is, what marketing would you like to see from Cadena? So the motivation for this question is I often get asked this, and I have some answers, but I'm really curious to hear what folks have in mind. And also, this is unabashedly us and me brainstorming and trying to crowdsource some ideas. I'm realizing that doing this live might be challenging because it takes time to type and such. All right, so we have a answer from Mustango. Anything as long as it won't attract the SEC's attention. Yeah, that's a good point. And for some people may have noticed that there's a couple questions that were asked that were more explicitly about price that I haven't answered just because of policy and such. But yeah, I think definitely we try to be mindful about marketing and doing things that are regulatory sound and conservative. From Mirror, marketing how the performance of DeFi and stables work on Cadena. Yeah, definitely. So I think that gets into a broader point, which is to say that, we've, I think, oftentimes been more focused on marketing Cadena, the layer one, and the blockchain and the platform. And you'll notice that over the last, especially 9 months, there's been a greater focus on also trying to offer some marketing support for projects that are building on Cadena. It's kind of interesting, right? Because there's this fine balance with there's oftentimes seen as like a tacit endorsement of a project if there's any sort of co-marketing, but I think you also want to try and promote as many projects as possible without having too many gatekeepers. So yeah, I think helping market more on the DeFi side, that makes a lot of sense. So appreciate you suggesting that. Getting the main Cadena Telegram to share links to the trading channels and discords. Yeah, I mean, I think people find them. Yeah, not my active policy, but I will say that it's always great to see how much community engagement there is across all the many different official and unofficial channels. Doing seminars. Yeah. I'd be curious what specifically you mean by seminars and what kind of content you want to see. We were starting to get more active on the conference circuit, and obviously on YouTube. So I think that's. But if you have some more specific ideas, would love to hear them, as that would be helpful. Hackathons, yeah, yeah, I think that's spot on. I think hackathons is something we've been thinking about for a while now, and kind of about making rubber meets road and sort of figuring out who's internally going to spearhead that and run it. As it's definitely a big amount of effort, but also we've talked with a few third parties about running a hackathon and sort of facilitating the logistics. There hasn't been a good match yet, but I'm kind of looking for the right event or location. So I think that'd also be something interesting to kind of think about, is where we should hold a hackathon in terms of city, or if it's more virtual. So if folks have thoughts on that, feel free to drop them, here on YouTube or on Discord. But yeah, would be very curious to see what kind of format someone would like to see for hackathon, namely, virtual or in person, kind of what the time length they would imagine. And then of course, for hackathon to run and be successful, it's most important that the people that are going to attend the hackathon and actually code and pact, we understand their preferences. So maybe the next step there actually is honestly just to start obtaining a list of folks that would want to attend a hackathon, and then we can sort of tailor it to their specific needs. All right, there's some really, really great questions here. Distribution says start with small meetups. There's no perfect solution, just do it. I like it. Thanks for that. Cool. Another question is, what project on Cadena excites you the most? Let's see here. Give a minute or so for folks to respond. All right. See, Wizza. We got Link's Wallet. Mining projects, Canadian Life Sale, Mock, CAD Cars, Wizza, Kadena Hashing. Anything worked on by Thanos or Squeegee? ZK Rollups. Cadena Life Sales. Nightbreakers. Link's Wallet. Awesome. So great array of projects there. It's honestly really interesting for me just to hear what folks on the stream are paying most attention to and most excited about. So yeah, a lot of it's here. Yeah, little Ledger shout out. I feel you. Link's Wallet. Link's Wallet. All right. Very, very cool. And I'll ask one sort of final question to folks, which is who would you like to have on a campfire? I figured this would be a good question to end on here, a little future planning. All right. So far I see Francesco, Thanos. Oops. Francesco, Thanos, Thanos, Stuart Haber, Thanos, Dr. Haber, Stuart Haber, Brooks. So, okay. Sounds like we have a few names there, which have largely been Thanos, Stuart Haber, Francesco, Nick Sabo, Satoshi. Yeah, I don't know. Is our Satoshi impersonator is the next Elvis impersonator? Maybe that'll be a good genre of crypto live stream content. Monica. I actually just saw Monica acquaintance back in East Denver. It's cool to catch up with her. Satoshi. Mark Cuban. I have had lunch with Mark Cuban. Really, really nice guy. And yeah, that would be cool. I think he does his own media appearances though, so it's pretty rare to get him on stuff if you're not paying him the big bucks. Could you do more of these AMAs with us, just answering questions and engaging? Yeah, definitely. So I've been doing these weekly for the past several weeks, and these are a lot of fun. So appreciate you being here, CZ the goat, and everyone else that's been here. I think we will wrap up now. We're kind of at time, but thank you everyone for joining me for another Kadena Campfire. I hope this was interesting and useful. I regret that we weren't able to have Doug on here with us, but hopefully the reverse AMA was fun, and I know given me at least some things to think about and helping us shape some of our future content. So, and it's really cool to hear also about what projects people are most excited about, and hearing what's on the community's mind. So appreciate everyone for tuning in. Cadena Army, stay strong. Great to see you all, and hope that you'll attend our next campfire with Stuart Popejoy next week. Until then, be well.